Hey everybody, this is Kara Crossway Brindle back with my good friend Gabrielle. Hi Gabrielle, how are you?
Hello. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat with you once again.
Yes, yeah, I know familiar faces. I continue to bring my friends and colleagues on, but you all have such amazing information to share. So I know I purposely sought you out for this video because I had this thought, and you were like, "Yeah, I've been talking about that for months." I was like, "Oh." So, as someone who also does burnout trainings, more so recently, I feel like you're doing a lot of amazing trainings around burnout. I wanted to talk to our audience about some of those typical characteristics or personality traits that folks might embody that might put them at greater risk of burnout. So, I know I'm going to tell the audience about the one that I brought to your attention. We're like, yep, check, check, check. But maybe we can just kick it off by talking about what you've been doing with your burnout trainings and the fact that you've come across some of this already.
Yeah, so like a lot of us, I was very burnt out. And, Kara and I kind of have like some similarities and overlap there. But if you didn't know, I pivoted, I sold my group practice, and now due to my own burnout, and now I'm doing training, speaking, consulting, coaching, retreats, all around
Mm,
burnout. And I became really passionate about it because we're all talking about it, but I felt like nobody was talking about it the way that I was talking about it. And I really wanted to go deeper. It's like, I want to know the why. I want to know why I'm feeling this way and what I can do to manage it. Like, what is the true deeper meaning of self-care? And so that's why I talk a lot about nervous system stuff and polyvagal theory when I train and talk about burnout.
Lovely. Yes. So the thing that I had reached out to a week or two ago, and I was like, hey, is this just me thinking about it this way? Just for context for the audiences, I was like, I was noticing that people who have vivid imaginations might also be that much more in tune with their clients' traumas because they can see it in their head, right? So, like for me, I
Mhm.
describe it as I can see like the movie playing in front of my or behind my
Yes.
eyes. So like they don't have to go into all the detail, but my brain tends to fill in the gaps. And I was
Hmm.
wondering if that was part of why I burnt out when doing heavy trauma work for several years in a row, doing mostly EMDR and whatnot. And I reached out to you and you're like, yep, yeah, that's a thing. So tell me how you discovered that. Like, was that something clients or consultees were telling you or fellow therapists? What was that?
Yeah, and it is absolutely true. And I discovered that, or I heard about this first actually when I was going through a very hard time working in child protective services. Like nobody is surprised there that that job
Yeah.
was killing me, literally. And they had a therapist there who I was trying to think of his name and I can't remember it, but he did a couple of sessions with me and they were great, but it was like too little, too late kind of a situation. But one of the things he did tell me was don't imagine the things that your clients are telling you because
Mm-hmm.
your brain thinks it's real. And I kind of also at that point, again, I was really burnt out and it was just kind of like I wasn't in a place to hear that. And I just had like one foot out the door and I was ready to move on. But
Mm-hmm.
it came back up when we were doing, we both did some videos for an app on burnout prevention and compassion fatigue. And I remembered that. I was like, oh, yeah, that was actually a really good skill. And I should also keep practicing that for myself. So, because your
Mm-hmm.
brain and doesn't know what's real and what's not. So, if you are one of those people who imagines things, which I do because I know now that I have ADHD and I'm highly sensitive and very intuitive, and like you, I don't need somebody to tell me every little detail. But if I have kind of an idea of what's happening, even when I'm doing EM or when I was doing EMDR and I wouldn't hear all the details, if I knew just a little bit, I actually remember once doing EMDR with a client and she had a recent situation. And when she was telling me, she didn't tell me all the details, but she said something and I remember I felt a pit in my stomach. And I was like, is this how you're feeling? Like, am I feeling how you're feeling right now? She's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly how I feel. I'm like, oh, well, now I feel really upset.
Right. You're like, this is probably really helpful to the client, but this is hurting me, right? As I feel all
Exactly.
that. Hmm.
Yes. Yes. So when you do imagine things, even if it's just imagining them, and even if you're not a therapist, even if you are an attorney or a teacher, or you process claims for people who have had like fatal car accidents, like you take all of that stuff in and you're feeling it and you're taking it on as your own.
Yeah, yeah. And so obviously that's like probably one piece to a puzzle of like just because you have a vivid imagination doesn't equate to burnout, but it's a factor, right? Of like, oh, I'm seeing all this now. I have more vicarious trauma and I have more compassion fatigue because I see it replaying in my head or whatever that looks like. So I think of like avid readers also have this skill, right, where they love to read and they can see it kind of floating in the
Yes.
air.
Yes.
So that might be a piece of what we say of like, great imagination, avid reader might be a factor for burnout. What else do you think would be a factor for people to say this is putting you more at risk, whether you can control it or not?
Yes. That's a good point with avid readers because I love reading and I like to read psychological thrillers.
Oh
And
gosh, yeah.
sometimes I know, I'm like, why do I do that?
Uh,
But sometimes I am reading it and I'm like, oh, yeah, like I can see this very clearly in my mind. I need a little bit of a break. But besides people who are like that, I think that certain personality types for sure. So if you are type A, if you are a perfectionist, if you need to be in control, those are all things that can definitely be risk factors or contribute to burnout.
Yep, check, check, check. I've identified with all those things.
Me
That
too.
makes sense because of that need for control or like, just like being fully in something, I feel like is how I would describe it. Of like you're all in, right? When you're like a workaholic, you're a perfectionist, or
Mhm.
you're a type A person, like we don't do anything half-assed. So it's like you're all in, which also puts you more at risk of feeling that burn or the burnout. I'm also thinking of like Enneagram type twos, like the helpers, right?
Yes.
Of like they gravitate towards these roles that you kind of named of like more susceptible to a trauma response, a teacher, a police officer, a nurse, a doctor, a therapist. Like maybe that would be a factor too.
Yes, for sure. And I also think kind of to go along with like helpers, because we often are people pleasers. I say we
Mhm.
because me. I'm,
It's true.
I'm,
A lot of people I work with too. Yeah.
I'm a recovering people pleaser. And I would also say sometimes I say people pleasing, and I've had people comment on my social media and be like, that's not a bad thing. And it's not.
Mhm.
Being kind to people is not a bad thing. But
Right.
when you suppress your own needs and you become resentful, that is when it becomes a problem. And that
Mhm.
absolutely, totally led to my own burnout too, was like the people pleasing and the feeling guilty and shame and
Right.
like I want to help. Like all of that's, there's a lot to it, but definitely for sure that will certainly contribute.
Yeah. So people who identify as like I'm wearing the superhero cape, I want to help. Maybe they have poor boundaries because of that, or they're saying yes more than they
Mm.
actually are saying no. Or like you said, resentment builds from that. So that's also like our Enneagram nines, our mediators who don't
Yes.
speak up for themselves. I have Enneagram a lot in my head right now. Is that you? Yeah.
I don't know a lot about the Enneagram, but I did take one. Like I took one online,
Uh-huh.
and I actually I thought I was going to be a two, but I think I mostly was a nine,
Yeah.
which
Hmm.
surprised me.
Yeah. We'll have to have a whole conversation if you ever want to take a deep dive on that, because I think that
Will do.
really applies to consultation and coaching and the things that you do, because it's just another way to look at personality, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so twos and nines are showing up in my head. Yeah, just folks that are like very driven or called to help. That their worth is wrapped up in what they do. So those type
Yes.
A's, workaholics show up in my head again, the perfectionism. But yeah, like I think for me it was that creative piece of what they can see in their head. So maybe we're also talking about highly sensitive people, because you had mentioned that
Yes.
like you're intuitive and some people call themselves feelers or like heavy feelers. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that I wished if I could change something that I had known more about that like 5 or even 10 years ago. And I am
Mhm.
newly diagnosed with ADHD, and I am, we won't get too much into this, but I'm newly accepting of my spirituality and intuition and being highly sensitive. And if I had known more about that and known how I absorb things and just how my system is different from other people's, that I get overstimulated really easily, I can't socialize as much as some other people. And if I had known all of those things before, I think that that would have really helped. But I
Mhm.
know them now. And so now I understand that, like, I can't, because except for today. I've done meetings back to back, and I'm going to be really tired tonight. And I know that. I know tonight is going to be a night where I'm on the couch, zoning out to Real Housewives of New York in my pajamas, and I'm going to be really happy about it. But before, I would just keep pushing myself. I would say yes. I would be like, nope, the shoulds, right? Like, I should do this. I should be working on this. Other people can do it. Why can't I do it? I'm just going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And so all of that stuff just blends in together,
Hmm.
especially if you are highly sensitive or if you're neurodivergent and you are masking, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, it's going to come back one way or another, is what I'm hearing you say. Yeah, I feel like all the qualities you've named make us really good helpers with mental health professionals specifically, because you and I are both still that. Um, the things that make us really effective in that role also hurt us, is
Yeah.
what I'm kind of landing on from what we've shared. Like, huh, okay,
Yes.
really effective one-on-one, but maybe not great in the long run of like, we can't do this for 20 years without some sort of adjustment or knowing our edges or having
Mhm.
those boundaries to not burn out. So that's interesting, right?
Yeah, it's, I recently, I don't even think, I don't know when this article's come out, but I was interviewed for an article with Simple Practice actually, and she asked me, do you think it's possible to work in this field without burning out? And I was like,
Mm,
good question. I don't know. I feel like things have changed so much in our world. Like people just can't do what we used to be able to do. We used to be
right,
able to hear about people who did retire from this field and who did it for 25, 30, 40 years, and I just don't know if that's sustainable these
right.
days.
I agree with you. People have asked me that question too, and I, for some reason, have seven in my head, where it's like at the 7 year mark, a lot of people start to question the momentum. Do they need to pivot? Do they need to make a change? Are they feeling it? That's probably tied somewhere into like so many years of like pre-licensure and then licensure
Hmm.
and then in the field for whatever amount of time. But for some reason, most of the people I've worked with, it's been right around 7 years where something happens. So
There's something with seven because
yeah,
when we when we bought this house, our realtor said that too. She's like, most people live in a house for 7 years and then they start
huh,
looking for a change. So there's something about the number seven and
yeah.
change.
Yeah, I don't 7 year itch, right? Like I know that's
Yeah.
more intimacy and relationship related, but there's something with the number
Still.
seven. So obviously as people are watching this video and they're taking in, kind of these characteristics or factors, they might be like, yep, that's me, or I'm checking off boxes. And so I know you had said like, don't imagine what people are going through. That was the advice you were given. I can't help but wonder of like, if we say don't think about it, we think about it, right? Like
Yeah.
don't think about pink elephants. Now I'm thinking about pink elephants. So this might just be a precursor to some of the trainings and things that you offer, but is there one little tip that you would give people of how to like lessen that possibility of overthinking or really putting the visual to something that's traumatic?
Yes, I have a lot, but I will share this one that I think is really helpful that anybody can do. And this is something you can do, like, you don't even need to be a therapist. You could just like be at the grocery store, whatever, and you don't want people to talk to you. Or like if you are one of those people that always has somebody coming up to you and like is telling you about their ailments, right? So imagine yourself in a bubble or force field. Actually, my therapist taught me this. And you're in your bubble, right? And the things that your client or whoever is talking to you about, they bounce off the bubble. And I taught this to my clinicians too, and one of them had a very, very difficult, challenging client. And he would sometimes say like really just weird and rude and mean things to her, and she would imagine them as like the little laughing emoji bouncing off of her bubble. So,
Ah,
so that stuff stays out there, and then there's a little hole in your bubble and that you control. You get to control what comes into your heart space. So you're not hearing the trauma and the things that you're hearing, those stay out there. They're bouncing off the bubble. But if there's
yeah.
information that you need to know that's going to serve your highest good, it can come in.
Hmm. I love that visual. I think the second tip on my side of things is moving your body right after you have
Yes.
something like this, so it doesn't actually get to stick, right? So bubble image works really well for this. And then I also think of like the literal shake it off of like,
Yeah.
oh, like I need to like put that somewhere else or release that. That's not mine to hold. So for our folks who are more movement driven, maybe that would be a way they could incorporate the bubble with some body action. to say, nope, don't want that to land. So I'm just
Yep.
going to literally move away
Push.
from it or shower or whatever to take it off.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, and that does work. And sometimes I think it really depends on the person too. Like some people who are a little bit more intellectual will be like, this sounds stupid and ridiculous, but it's not.
Yeah. Like try something, anything to not let the images stick, right? So,
Yes.
yeah, these are just two tips of, as you alluded to, many, many thoughts that you and I might have about how to handle the heavy in our career or anyone who's watching this video. I know I tend to speak more to our mental health colleagues, which is why I keep mentioning that. But
Yeah.
who knows, someone might watch this and be like, that's still applicable to me.
Hmm.
But yeah, I appreciate you having the conversation of just like all the things that might contribute to burnout when it comes to personality and just experiences that people have that make them more susceptible. Any final thoughts for our viewers on this topic?
As we know, this is a deep, pervasive issue. And I know we talked about like, can you be in this field without burning out? And I just want to say that, and I know that you know this too, Kara, that this is, it goes so deep and it is a really shitty, hard hole to climb out of. And it is so much easier to prevent it in the first place. So if you're watching this and you're like, newly licensed or you're just getting your master's, like please reach out, get supervision, get consultation. Even if you've been in this field for a while, same thing, because there are so many
Mhm.
things that you can do now to prevent this from happening. It just takes a little bit of a conscious effort on your end, but it will make a huge difference in your well-being.
Yeah, don't wait for the deep dark hole. Don't wait for the 7 year mark. Like, do the work now.
Yes.
Yeah, one of our colleagues, I loved what he said. He said he tries to do a check-in once a year. It's like, is everything I'm doing and serving me? How am I feeling about the work that I do? Do I need to change something, pivot, adjust? Yeah, why not have an annual check-in? Like, how am I doing in my profession? I think
Yeah.
that's a worthy tool also to be like, am I in burnout? Let's check that out. Let's make a little
Yeah.
date and see.
I love that because you get like an annual physical. You should do the same thing for your like self spiritually and emotionally. Like,
Yeah.
am I still working within my values? Is this still what I want to do? Am I meeting my goals? Like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, we get so caught up in the day to day and we're on autopilot that before you know it, yeah, it has been 7 years and you're like, I really hate this and I'm really, you know,
Yeah.
depressed and I hate it. And there are so many things you could do to prevent yourself from getting there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Gabrielle and I have the lived experience. We've both been in professional burnout. It sounds like at least 1.5 to 2 times
Yes, at
each,
least.
based on our backgrounds. So we don't champion that. We don't recommend it. That's why we're talking about it. So I hope as a viewer, you're feeling inspired to do your own annual check-in. Think about the bubble. Think about movement. Think of things that might help you protect yourself a little bit without, of course, going callous and cold. That's not our goal here. But relationships take energy both ways, and so
Mhm.
something's coming back to you. And I just really appreciate you, Gabrielle, for your expertise in this area. I know you're talking to a lot of folks about this, and I appreciate you coming on video to talk to me about it.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about your burnout offerings that you have?
I am pretty easy to find because I have a very long last name. So, and I'm the only one. GabrielleJuliano-Villani.com, where you can find more about my trainings, my upcoming retreats. It's the same across all social media on Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram is at GJV Consulting.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure to include some of the contact info below this video for people who are like, I need more. But yes, hopefully everyone's feeling inspired to protect themselves, especially if you're an avid reader, have this really powerful imagination, you fill in the blanks. We are specifically talking to you because that was the inspiration for this video. So uh, give us, some comments below. Let us know what you think, if this resonates or not, and we'll see you in future videos. See you next time.